My name's Chris Dubois. I've been with Absolute for 20 years now. I'm currently the sales manager of the apparatus division. And this is all I do. This is full-time fire truck selling and purchasing, answering the types of questions that we're talking about. And in the past few years, there's been a major shift in the way people are purchasing fire trucks and the hurdles that are coming up as we're having these purchases come through. So what we wanted to do is kind of put it all in one forum and kind of just put it all out there, because piecemeal by piecemeal, when you try to explain this, it takes some time, right? So we've got lead times and pricing all extending at the exact same time in this industry. Historically, you never saw a truck that took more than a year from the time of order to completion and build. 8-10 months, maybe a year at the longest. And then now you're seeing the bottom end of deliveries being 24 months for some vehicles, all the way up to 48 plus months we're hearing in the industry and seeing in our own product. So you have to plan and purchase differently than you did before, because it is no longer buy at the beginning of the year, get it at the end of the year. You also have to think about how you manage your money differently now. We're in a time where commercial suppliers do not hold their prices for the manufacturers. So us as a fire truck manufacturer's representative, selling you something, say you are in an area that needs something on a Ford chassis or a Freightliner chassis, they don't hold that price for us. So if our build slot for you doesn't come for 3 years, built into the price of your truck is 3 years worth of brand XYZ increasing their pricing. And that creates an opportunity for language in a contract that can be a little bit open-ended, which is negative in our state's eyes, or you end up having to make a balloon price inflation into your purchase order to properly meet the laws of purchasing in this state. So there's a lot of things that are coming up. There's a possibility of some other federally mandated changes and suggestions coming down the road over these next couple of years that will create more contract language that we're going to have to keep a close eye on as we move forward into the next terms. So when everybody says, well, why is it like this? So everybody wants to say, you can't blame it on COVID, COVID's over. You go all the way back to 2018 and 19, if you follow the data from the fire apparatus manufacturers, you'll notice that in those timeframes, you started to see an uptick in the industry across the platform of more orders coming in. Now, some of that is due to historic purchasing cycle replacements. So the late 90s, early 2000s were very good for the fire truck market. People were buying a lot of trucks then. So as they're coming to end of life, people are getting ready to buy more. In that same time frame, we were already starting to notice skilled labor shortages in the factories where you just couldn't get enough people to do more. So you start to see timing edging out. In 2018 and 19, you're starting to see things trickle into that 12, 14, or even a little bit more on certain products range in the industry. Inconsistently, but it already started. You hit 2020, in March, the pandemic comes into our state as well as, filters its way through the country. In our state, you start having all of the social distancing, lockdowns, safety guidance. What that did from a purchasing standpoint is you had towns operating in a damage control mode, right? They were only doing the minimum they needed to do the business of the day in their town. Capital purchasing was put off to the side. People still bought in 2020, but it was a dramatic decrease for that time frame. There was also a concern of people running out of money because overtime was soaring because of people being out, being sick, covering for other people, changing shifts around, buying PPE that they didn't have planned in their budget, so the money had to come from somewhere. So everybody was gun shy to spend money in 2020. As things kind of get back into the swing of things in 21, you start to see some federal money, grants finding their way back into municipal funds. Things are stabilized. Towns did not lose out as much revenue and tax revenue as they thought. and they start getting ready to spend. So what's happening now is 21 becomes a catch-up year for everything that wasn't bought in 20, as well as everything that was expectedly supposed to be bought in 21. That starts off the beginning of the year. You see orders coming in at a pretty rapid pace. At the front end of that, you start to see some of the supply chain concerns start to find its way through. So that makes major waves. And now as orders are coming in, parts to complete vehicles are coming down. And you're now starting to see, hey, everybody's back to work, but they don't have the pieces they need to put the trucks together. Little things like this, every month, every manufacturer has so many trucks they can build a month. During the course of that month, you started to see, hey, we missed by 10 trucks. Well, that 10 trucks is not going to get made up the next month. There's only so many hours in a day. So everything just starts to creep backwards. Every month that goes bad just creates a longer backlog. At the exact same time, in 21 and 22, you've got people buying trucks at almost twice the amount of normal going through the whole country. So, for a perfect example, in January of 22, when you started to see the first large bulk purchases finding their way into our state from people trying to get ahead of the next problem, which was inflation, we started to see that come into the industry, and that's when the prices started to skyrocket. So 21, the prices weren't really over the top, but had come up some. 22, there ended up being multiple price increases across the industry from multiple brands, over 20% by the time everything's said and done. So you had everybody hurrying up to try and get ahead of every one of those price increases that they could, but then you had bubbles of orders. So you created this wave where we weren't building anything, building less in 20, still less in 21 than we normally should be. In 22, we start getting back a little closer to being on the mark of what we were building pre-COVID, but still making our way back there. 23 and 24 have actually been very good production-wise. We're back up and actually starting to exceed pre-COVID building time, getting closer to what we were doing in 18 and 19, and that's fantastic. But we're still outpacing orders coming in versus trucks going out. So the lead times are continuing to expand. A little bit slower now than they were in 22 and 23, but the times are still out there. And one of the biggest reasons for the times expanding is because so many people purchased at once for this multitude of reasons over the past 3 years that there's just so many orders in everybody's backlog. We could build trucks for the next 3 and change years without taking any orders and just building those trucks and be in business. Obviously, what we're building and selling now, we are selling into the future, which never was part of the fire truck purchasing model. Now, as we're into 23, 24, you now have another front coming where you have an EPA compliance change coming in 27. People are trying to get ahead of not having to buy the first generation of a new motor product. So you've got people jumping in and trying to get the last of the old style, which they knew and are comfortable with, instead of having to be those firsts. So with that EPA compliance, at the same time, you've got 2024, you had an NFPA update. It was not as significant of an update as there has been in the past, but they mandated some items on a truck that not everybody thought were, hot priorities. Now you have things like backup cameras and electronic stability control are included in every truck. Not everybody felt they needed it before, but now they're things that you have to have. So that is a amount of money that gets added to your truck. The EPA change, with Cummins being the only universal motor brand in the industry, now everybody will have to meet A27 compliance. I can't speak to how the others are handling their compliance, but Cummins is releasing 2 new motor blocks, essentially, that will be used for all of their diesel-driven apparatus. And moving forward, the X15, which is for all of your largest trucks, is going to now be moved into 26 because Cummins has to use up some EPA credits that they owe back. In doing so, they're going a year earlier. But if the backlogs are 2, 3, and 4 years out, you're already buying trucks today that have to have the new motor in the future. Guidance from Cummins has been slow because they're not ready to release it, because in their minds, they don't need that motor to be ready until 2026. So they still have a whole nother year on top of this. But we've been taking orders in the industry for new motors for almost a year now. So people have language and contracts and information out there about motors changing in a truck that they have on order because it's going to be built so far into the future. And there's a noticeable cost upgrade to these 27 compliant motors because of the new clean air technology being implemented. We're being charged more for this new EPA compliant motor. We have no way around it. There is no federal mandate to cut any of that out of municipal purchasing. So we're along for this ride together. So in New Jersey, the laws are very well stated out, and they have a fantastic website. We have some links information on where you can go and look up how some of this purchasing stuff works. For the most part in our state, we have been using cooperative purchasing contracts since 2011 and 12. The law passed in 11, and so 13 years old is the contract, the allowance of the usage. And since then, 98% or more of fire trucks in this state are purchased off of cooperative purchasing contracts these days. There is guidance in the local finance notice that you have to follow some rules. Now, with it being 13 years old, there are some items in there that have become voided out. So you essentially just have to kind of do some paperwork follow-up to go into those things. But as you find your way through it, it's very helpful on that guidance of what you can do. But like I said, this has become kind of the only way people do it now. The two primaries are HGAC and Sourcewell, and most townships are members at this point. So something that wasn't a primary concern for fire trucks in the past, because you weren't waiting years to get your truck, is you had to have your money paid for or in hand, encumbered, up front before you're allowed to buy anything in our state. That is still the law. But in 2003, they released the issuance of bond anticipation notes, bands. And essentially what that says is that a local unit may, in anticipation of issuance of bonds, borrow money and issue notes if the bond ordinance or subsequent resolution so provides. Any such notes shall be designated as bond anticipation notes. This allows you to bond the larger sum down the road when you're more ready to do so, but allows you to show that you're, in essence, allocating funds to make your purchase. So you are now following the law while not having to go do all of the work up front like you had to in the past. This has been around since 2003, but it didn't matter to fire trucks, so nobody ever paid attention when it came to this concept. There is an OSHA proposal on the street, which has been circulating around. I know the Division of Fire Safety had put a notice out to make people aware of it. There are some hearings that have been going back and forth, and not to scare people into buying fire trucks, but essentially one of the things that they're putting out there is reducing the life cycle of what they consider a safe fire truck and then passing it into law. There's arguments for both sides that have been going back and forth. There has been no clear designation as to what they're going to do yet. I believe there are supposed to be more hearings, and I think the video wasn't posted yet, but there was a hearing within the past 2 weeks with updates on where they are with this proposal. So you definitely are going to want to keep an eye on that. Once again, I also have the reference link on that for you guys to do your own checking in on that. So at any given time in the state of New Jersey, by the law of average, a quarter of the fire apparatus are due or coming due for replacement in the fleets. Now, small fleets, big fleets, for the most part, it doesn't matter. Something is coming up next. The automotive industry is starting to lean towards parts obsolescence. We're starting to notice component suppliers from major components, Detroit, Allison, to name a few, and a lot of the electronics components are obsoleting in less than 20 years, which used to be the gold standard for keeping a fire truck around in a non-metro region. And what we're finding some of the oldest trucks that people keep in their fleets over the 20-year mark were waiting or sitting for parts because of all of the supply chain issues that have been created. You've got these companies focusing on newer parts because there's more vehicles with the newer stuff than the older stuff on the street. So it's getting harder to fix your oldest fire trucks. This trend is also costing you more money for repairs as you're going through things. So we're noticing higher repair bills, we're noticing higher parts charges to us as a vendor, which then of course correlates and becomes your charge, because these vendors are going and having custom one-off parts rebuilt for older fire trucks. So when you start keeping trucks past that 25-year mark, you will definitely start to feel a noticeable increase in your repair costs. The timeline from order to in-service is now expanded, so you're starting to see people looking at replacing trucks earlier, so that way by the time the new truck comes in, now that truck is not as old as it would have been. So instead of waiting 20 years and then buying a truck, now you have to think about maybe doing it at the 17-year mark, or if you're in a metro department that has a higher rate, you might be in that 12-year, 13, So we're also starting to see on large fleet purchases, some of the larger cities are having to do these balloon purchases to catch themselves up and stagger out delivery. So around the country, and in North America, because Canada is actually also lumped in with some of our issues here, they're seeing these people having to go out and buy large sums of trucks all at once, and then maybe getting 2 of them this year, 2 the year after, 2 the year after that. And then in the next year, going into that cycle and buying once again another truck that is for the 4th year's cycle delivery to get themselves back on a normal cadence. They're going to have some years where there's going to be no deliveries and their repair costs are going to go up during that time on the oldest rigs. And they're kind of stuck, but there's only one way to fix this, and it's to move on and get and do this. The biggest thing you can do is keep moving, because if you wait, the snowball gets too big and you end up getting stuck in one of these balloon purchases. The other thing that we're starting to see some people do is line up their specs, or maybe even look at some retail units. Retail units don't work for everyone, and there's only so many retail units out there in the backlog as manufacturers continue to sell them off and try to get everybody's customer trucks built. So what's coming next is we are still seeing that outpacing. So 2025 appears to have an equal to, at worst case, 24. There's a chance that 25 could outpace 24 again. We don't know for sure, but right now we're not at the bottom of the hill. We've been climbing up the rate, and we don't know if we're going to start to see delivery reductions until at least into 26. Some of the smaller manufacturers are actually throttling the amount of orders they take in and actually turning down business, because with the smaller businesses, they are finding themselves having a span of control that they can't get past if they go past that 2-year mark. So they're actually cutting back who they do business with. So obviously, as the arc eventually catches up and starts to find its way down, it's going to be multiple years back down the hill. If it's taking us 4 and 5 years to reach this peak, it's going to take 4 and 5 years for it to come back down. And when it comes back down, there is a possibility in this industry, because of shifting in parts availabilities, staffing, purchasing just being different, things getting more expensive, you might start to see the new way of lead times never being that 1-year mark. There is an opportunity for that. That's in the future. That's all speculation, but it's going to take a long while, if ever, for it to get all the way back to the way it was. So what we're suggesting to people is not hurry up and buy a fire truck. What we're suggesting to people is to understand how their process works and how to be ready for their process. The first thing you must do to be able to buy a fire truck is have an order-ready specification. And what I mean is you have areas of jurisdiction that you're all different. Yes, you could buy a retail unit and it may work for you in your area and that speeds up your process. That becomes your order-ready specification. You're ready to order that retail truck. If you have to design a truck to work in your area of operation, you need to have that spec 100% ready to hand from the fire department to the purchasing agent so that they can then order that fire truck with the manufacturer. If you're waiting to get your money, per se, to figure out your design, you could end up rolling past a price increase. So now you're wasting money because you weren't ready. You've got to have that stuff ready. The other thing is having that specification complete allows you to have a exact price of your truck. You know what you're planning on spending. If you're just throwing a budget number out and not having a specification, as things happen, now you have to work backwards into that price. Nobody knew in 22 that the price of fire trucks was going to go up over 20% through the course of a singular year. That's not something anybody could have ever predicted coming, but it happened. And people had to hurry up and get it done. And that's why we ended up with a pressure wave. So get yourself ready. If you're planning on buying it on HGAC or Sourcewell, make sure you have your contract information clean. You're comfortable, like if you've already used it, you know you're on the contract. Have proposal documentation from your dealership that you're using. Be ready. If you have multi-year plans, everybody talks about their 5 and 10 year capital plans. Well, your 5 and 10 year capital plans are talking about when you need it, but now you need to think about revamping those plans for when I need it and dictate when it needs to be ordered and then arrive. Those are two different sets of numbers. So you have to start thinking about those conversations when you start looking at long-term planning in your towns and cities. Be ready to start breaking away from the traditional purchasing cycles. Town X always does our bonds in October, and this is when we do this, and this is when we do this. I understand that that cycle works and you need to maintain your purchasing cycles, but you need to start thinking about how to work around those cycles to not lose money or pay more money or lose more time by waiting for the sake of waiting. Yes, sir.
I'm the CFO in the town.
Yep.
If my fire chief comes to me and tells me that he needs this we'll make it happen. I mean, especially if we can get a little first. So if you talk to your guys,
and that's why we're trying to explain it to as many people as possible at once, because every day I get somebody who asks and says, hey, what's going on here? And some people are like, that's a lot. We're worried about this today. Well, let's worry about that tomorrow. And tomorrow it costs a lot of money. Yep. And I understand it, you know.
sorry about that.
No problem. What town are you with?
I work for a private company.
Okay. Sure thing. So other things the towns can do. There are some 20-year bonding availabilities that have become available to municipalities. You should, if you're looking to find ways to extend your dollars out, you should talk to your bond counsel about that and see what is available to you, what's different from the same old, same old. And then you need to have clear and open communication. The fire chief, the purchasing people, council, and whoever you plan on doing business with should all be on the same page with everything that's going on. I try to communicate as much information as I can about things that are happening to the customers, price increases coming, lead times changing because they are changing rapidly, understanding where their budget is and what kind of monies they need to allocate, things that have changed. There are simple things that change, like the equipment that goes on fire trucks. Those companies all had price increases too, not just the fire truck component manufacturers. Your loose equipment, your turnout gear, your air packs, that has all gone up at the same time. So when you're starting to think about the all-encompassing business of doing business, of having a fire department, you have a lot of shuffling and where to spend money and how to spend that money going on. So what Absolute is doing is, we're doing things like this to try to educate as many people as possible so they understand that it's not the way it was the old way. Secondly, we're working with Tax Exempt Leasing Corp, and they are working on different options in municipal leases that they can work with you guys on different payouts, meeting the New Jersey regulations. They're actually one of the primary leasing companies that works with Winter Ford doing a lot of the police vehicles. So you may already be doing business with them on other products in your town. So they have no down payment options. They have down payment options. They have the 2-year skip option, which allows you to not have to make your first payment for 2 years. And that's not, no smoke and mirrors. You pay a little bit more for that, but having that 2-year skip allows you to work through some of your paperwork and finances on the backside well before you have to make that first payment. In this state, it's a tough, thing to think about, but as you make those first bond payments or you make those first lease payments, there are fire trucks that you're going to make those first payments on with your bond or your lease before you get them. It's an impossibility not to. So you're going to have to take some of that into account. People need to be aware and understanding of that, going into things, because people freak out when they pay for things they don't have, and I fully understand that. And then, like I said, we're working to try to help people get specification ready so that they're ready when the time comes. The biggest thing we can do is work together. In the meantime, I can't stress enough that the fire trucks you have are valuable to you. They are expensive to replace. They take a long time to replace. So do your preventative maintenance, even if it's old. Keep that thing running. Preventative maintenance costs less than fixing broken things. The other thing is that used trucks right now are going at a premium. So at the tail end, when you're looking at getting your new fire truck, you have an opportunity for your old truck to be worth something to somebody. And there are people scrambling to buy used fire trucks to keep their departments operating because they have fleets that have gotten so old and their snowball got too big. So now they don't have the truck. So they're buying holdover trucks in anticipation of having to wait for their new trucks. I've seen some examples recently in the state where people are getting significant money for trucks that most people would have considered ready for the scrapyard. So keep that in mind. If that truck is running, it is worth it. It is worth money to somebody, or if it's not monetary, you can help out a neighbor possibly by making life easier for them. You also need to keep up and watch your ISO requirements. If you let fire trucks die and you don't meet your ISO requirements anymore, you could run into your own separate set of issues with your insurances and things of that sort. If a truck is too far past its life cycle, you may be one of these people that has to start looking to buy used fire trucks from somebody to maintain fleets. So we're getting involved in helping people place between town to town and with some of the used truck brokers to help you guys float this time by. We also have worked on retail apparatus. So Absolute, because we have a very metro-minded business in this state, we work with the rural departments and the metros, but no manufacturer goes and puts retail units on the street that are metro designed. We worked with E1 to specifically put out city-hardened fire trucks that are going to be readily available over the course of 2025, 26, and 27. And obviously, as things progress forward, we will continue to progress forward with that as we watch what the market does.